This is Chris Collinsworth. Be sure to check out the PFF College podcast as our experts provide insight on all the league's top stories. Every game, every player, every play. Download and subscribe on iTunes or your favorite provider.
Hello and welcome back to the PFF podcast. Mike, we made it. Week 17 come and gone. The regular season is done. We are now into January playoff football. But for 20 teams, that's it. You're done. You're looking at the draft. Your season's over. It's time to pack up and go home.
Flew by, didn't it? Seems like only 16 weeks ago. It was week 1.
And we are now recording on Black Monday, the Monday where NFL head coaches pack their bags and go home because a lot of them are getting fired. Obviously, we've had a few guys go before Black Monday. Guys in season, Jeff Fisher is sadly no longer with us among the coaching fraternity. Gus Bradley was relieved of his gig. But we've got a lot more gone. Chip Kelly's gone. Rex Ryan is gone. Gary Kubiak, possibly the most interestingly, has decided to step aside. Though interestingly, his press release, didn't actually say anything about retiring. It was just stepping down from being head coach, and actually talked about, potential coaching, I think, down the line. And Mike McCoy is gone in San Diego. Is that all the ones, I think? So we've got 6 vacancies so far, and potentially more on the way when it comes to head coaches. So the first thing I'm interested in is, what's the best job? If you're one of these hotshot new head coaching candidates, where do you want to go?
I think it's pretty obvious which one's the best job, and it's the one that didn't actually fire their head coach. I think Denver has easily the most talent of any of those teams. They're just, desperately in need of a quarterback at this point, or, some semblance of an offensive line as well. So I think that one's easily the best job. But of the ones that actually got fired, with the talent there, I think that San Diego is probably the best job. They had a lot of guys hurt this year, and they're probably the only one out of that, group of people with a legit starting quarterback that you can, build a team around.
There's a lot of interesting teams in the list, though, because like Jacksonville have added an absolute ton of talent to that roster and have clearly got an owner with a degree of patience that's willing to kind of buy into a system and give it a chance to work and, work through the kind of stuff that's usually a pain for head coaches, where they come in with an idea, a system, a game plan, and they get a year to make it work, and then they're fired again. That doesn't seem like it would happen in Jacksonville, though who knows how many cycles you have to get into before you just lose patience. And
I was going to say, they might just be jaded at this point.
Yeah, exactly. And it becomes a yearly cycle just because you're fed up waiting every time. But at least from what we've seen so far, Jacksonville under Shad Khan actually appears to be a reasonably good gig from those terms.
No, I think they definitely have enough talent there on defense where you can win with them. But again, it's a spot where you're in that sort of quarterback purgatory. You spent that high draft choice, or I guess you didn't spend that high draft choice on Blake Bortles, so you're not necessarily tied to him. But then you have to go out and find a quarterback elsewhere if you're not going to go with Blake Bortles. So you kind of have that issue, but you do have a lot of receiving talent to throw to. So it's not like, it will be impossible to develop a quarterback in that in Jacksonville.
It's always interesting when it comes to the interview process and the kind of stuff that you would talk about if you're interviewing a head coach. I would imagine a large portion of any Jacksonville head coaching interview would be, how do you fix Blake Bortles? Because we had this quarterback that played, really quite well in the second year. It looked like he was on his way to becoming a legit quarterback, and everything fell apart in year 3. So we have a guy that we believe in. The GM is so far not going anywhere. Part one of the question has got to be, okay, you've looked at the tape. How do you fix Blake Bortles?
Yeah, I think I looked at their interview requests earlier, and it was Josh McDaniels, Kyle Shanahan. It was offensive coordinators, it was offensive-minded guys who they had requested interviews for their head coaching job, which basically is what you're saying. They want someone to come in, and they don't they want Blake Bortles to be the guy. They don't want to have to keep searching for a quarterback. They want someone to make him into the guy he could become. And I still think he could. I mean, he showed enough that second year that he could, but a lot of things went wrong this year with him. He came out today and said that he had 2 separated shoulders and wrist tendonitis or something, which, I mean, every guy that has a bad year should come out and say that they're injured afterwards. But I'm not 100% buying it. But, I mean, there could be reasons why he had a bad year, and he still could turn it around and be, a franchise quarterback. But, man, he really regressed. Like, even just, we've talked about it nauseam on here, just fundamentally, he regressed in a lot of ways. So, I think you do need someone to come in who is offensive minded with the roster that they have at the moment.
I mean, that's potentially a huge boost to somebody if it turns out that Bortles was, in fact, his play just went to crap because he had a whole sequence of injuries that just derailed him and made him, stuff like mechanics can go completely awry if you've got a separated shoulder.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I mean, that's potentially huge. That he didn't just inexplicably fall to pieces. There was actually a set sequence of things that happened.
I would like to believe that he is, it was hampering just horrible injuries all year, but, everyone's going to say that so.
The San Francisco one, media people today have been really hammering some of these guys.
They've been snippy.
I think it's more than snippy. I mean, they've been going really after some of these interviews, and Jed York was being interviewed and basically was being asked why he wasn't firing himself by the media, to which eventually he came around and pointed out that he owns the team and you don't relieve the owner of the team. That's just the way it is. I own the team, you guys don't, deal with it, was, I guess, what he was trying to say in a rather more polite way than I think I would have managed at that point. But also, I think they went pretty hard after Doug Whaley in Buffalo, partly made by his admission that he wasn't actually in on the decision to fire Rex Ryan. How on earth does that happen?
That there was a incompetency off in between 49ers and the Bills today, just which franchise looked like more of a mess, and it's hard to say which one did, because when your GM is not involved in the decision of firing a head coach, like, that seems, what is he? I think that's what one of the reporters even asked him. It's like, what do you do then if what are you doing here if you're not involved in that? And that's just like, it really is. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but that has to be some sort of crazy power struggle going on in both those places for both these situations to arise like they have.
I mean, that sounded so ridiculous when it came out in terms of quotes that I had to go and find the press clip and find how exactly, what the hell was that about? And he came out and he said that, so they had their weekly phone call meeting with the ownership. And at the end of this meeting, Rex asked to speak to the ownership on his own, without Whaley there. And so Whaley clicks off. And then the end result of this phone call is that he gets called back and basically told that Rex Ryan is no longer the head coach. So I really want to find out what happened in that other conversation, because Rex apparently was the guy that requested that. It wasn't like, he was summoned back afterwards and then they told Doug, actually, by the way, we fired Rex. Rex went looking for that conversation. That conversation clearly didn't go well, and the upshot of it was Rex and Rob hit the streets, and it was done sufficiently immediately that the GM wasn't even informed until later. So that sounds like it's some audio that would be fun to listen to.
It also might not bode well, actually, for Doug Whaley's job in the future if it might be writing on the wall there saying, hey, you're probably next. If that's, I don't want to say it is, but it definitely seems fishy for that to be the case at this point.
Yeah, well, no matter what happens, it's not a good thing that the GM was essentially informed afterwards as a, by the way, we've canned the head coach. And then
the crazy thing is, though, I still think the 49ers are more like the 49ers situation was more incompetent. The fact that they're going to have their 4th head coach in 4 seasons is unbelievable to me. I don't see how at any point in time you could think that that's going to be a successful strategy. Like, I don't.
Well,
you just wasted 4 years in retrospect.
Bobby Slowick pointed to a report that came out yesterday that said that the decision to fire Chip Kelly had been made, but they were going to have one last meeting with him where they might change their mind. Like, if he essentially pitched them a good enough reason not to fire him, they would change their mind and not fire him. Which must have been, again, that's another meeting that I want to hear. I want to hear the audio of how that went down. That
he's just on his knees begging.
Okay, Chip, look, we're going to fire you, but if you can come up with a really, really good reason not to, we might change our mind. We might, you might save your job. So let's have it.
He should have brought Coach O's binder in or whatever. Because like Ed Orgeron had one of those meetings with LSU, and then he got the job. So I think Chip Kelly should take a page out of his book.
I mean, that sounds like one of those things where it's like, look, we just don't want the story to be that we fired you on the bus on the way home, so we want to have a meeting.
And you had to take a flight back with the team.
Exactly. Yeah. So we want to have a meeting afterwards, then we'll fire you, and then it's all clean and the way it should be.
Yeah. I'll say this. Chip Kelly gets a bad rap. I think he still knows what he's doing from a coaching perspective. I still think he's good at that aspect. I think his biggest flaw is his personality, which a lot of being a head coach in the NFL, I think his personality and getting a team to, play together, rally together, like doing a lot of the stuff, the Pete Carroll, the John Harbaugh, guys who aren't, maybe necessarily X's and O's calling game plans, but more, leaders of a team. And Chip Kelly I don't think he's had that at any point in his career, but I still think he knows, I still think his scheme, that sort of stuff is sound. I still think he's a good football mind, but yeah, I do agree that maybe as a head coach in the NFL, that's not his ideal position.
Do you think his scheme,
sort of like Mark Trestman,
do you think his scheme functions in the NFL the way he wants to run it, or is he essentially a college coach at heart? Because the big thing coming into this year, we talked about it before, was that it just didn't change, didn't develop, it didn't evolve from day one. This is my system, this is what we are running, and it works, so we're running it exactly as it is in the book. Day one was the same as day, I don't know how many hundred days it got into it in Philadelphia, but there was no changing of the system at any point. It didn't develop to try and counter some of the things that NFL teams were doing to it. Is that a terminal problem in the NFL, or does it fix itself if he goes back to being offensive coordinator?
I think he changed some. I think as the year went on this year, they got better. I think it was, it looked different than, it had evolved to some degree. And to be honest, the 49ers offense was a lot better this year than they were last year. They were like all-time bad last year. I think they averaged below 15 points a game last year, and they were somewhere around like 20. So they went up by about 5 points per game. They were just working with one of probably the worst offensive personnel in the entire NFL. So I can't really blame him for, just stuff not working this season.
Actually, one more part to the disaster that was San Francisco is there was another report that came out today that they were upset that they hadn't drafted Dak Prescott, which it's slightly less ridiculous.
In retrospect, yes, you should be, but yeah.
It's slightly less ridiculous when you flesh it out. And apparently, what they were actually upset by is that Chip Kelly apparently really liked Dak Prescott in the draft process, but for whatever reason, that didn't get folded into the evaluation or the decision-making process.
He didn't tell anyone.
Yeah, either he didn't tell anyone or they didn't they explicitly kept coaching input out of this. But
because he literally couldn't have any input in any personnel decisions after Philadelphia.
Exactly. We've removed all decision-making privileges from you. You don't have any input at all. And then it turns out they were quite upset because he really liked Dak Prescott, which
that should be in his favor. But yeah, no, it's a mess. I don't know. The thing is, I don't know what head coach they're going to get at this point, or even GM. You're not going to get top end talent who's going to want to go there and be like, oh, if I screw up, I'm out in a year. Although it's not too bad considering you still get the guaranteed money of the contract. So being out in a year is not the worst thing in the world, but still, I think you want some semblance of job security, and really, San Francisco at this point offers none of that.
I'm telling you, getting to the point where you become a fired coach is like the jackpot. You want to be one of these guys that gets canned after a year, because then you just have 3 years worth of beach money to chill.
Yeah, you think Charlie Weiss is upset right now that he's not a head coach somewhere?
I mean, he's still getting paid at this point, isn't he, or something ridiculous?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he is.
There's guys out there that are like living for decades on the back of this cash. But that brings us to one thing I think that's always kind of interesting is every time we start talking about head coaching candidates and guys that should be brought in, and Shad Khan did an interview and he said that they've taken input from everywhere. They've talked to all kinds of people and everyone they can think of to try and narrow the field or put them in the right direction and just generally get as much info as possible. And somebody suggested that they promote Doug Marrone from, inside the system and make him head coach. Why is the NFL so obsessed with retread coaching hires? Guys that have proven not able for the job. Let's just give them another shot. Maybe they get it this time.
After Bill Belichick had success, it meant every failed head coach in the NFL. I don't know if that's what it is, but people are terrified of being, the Cleveland Browns, the team that screwed it up and, fired the coach before he was the coach. And people are so willing. And it's also because it's such a relationships-based business. Like, it's who you know and who you're comfortable with. And people know head coaches that have been in the league a while. So guys will just get second chances just based on, how that's kind of how it works, which, and I don't understand it whatsoever, but it happens year after year. And Doug Marrone is crazy to me because just the way he looked, what he did in Buffalo was they were awful. Their offense was awful in Buffalo when that's his strong suit. So I don't know how his name's brought up in these conversations.
The only way it makes any sense to me to go back again on a sort of retread coach is if, one, you have a guy like Marty Schottenheimer who was basically just fired despite doing a really good job because he didn't win a playoff game. That, I think, makes sense because there's a certain standard you're going to hit, and you can try and kind of figure out the winning the playoff game part later. Or two, if the first time round the guy was young and ended up in over his head, but had an idea and it just didn't work out. So I can see
Josh McDaniels.
Yeah, I can see the argument for Josh McDaniels. It would terrify me to hand the keys of a franchise to Josh McDaniels, but I can at least see the logic. He really young, got given the thing completely in over his head, but the logic was always that this guy eventually down the line would become a good head coach.
Yeah, I can see it for guys who have also had some sustained success, 2 or 3 years of maybe playoff caliber teams and then fell off maybe due to roster or whatever. The Andy Reids, if people were talking about Mike McCarthy getting fired, Mike McCarthy, stuff like that, guys who had some sustained success, all of a sudden they take a downturn. I think those guys like that are still probably good coaches, just, in need of new situations at that point. I think the Andy Reid hire definitely worked out well for Kansas City. So I can see some of those guys, but rehashing names of guys who had 3 to 4 year stints where maybe they had one playoff appearance, that's just, I don't see why, without any sort of tangible improvement in between where a guy goes and is a coordinator of a top tier defense. Marrone was an offensive line coach for a bad offensive line with the Jaguars, so I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, it's the guys where you literally can't come up with a good reason why they should get the job. Like, outside of maybe sitting down with them and then blowing you away in an interview, which we're not privy to. But this is before that. This is before it even gets that far. This is why you're talking to this person. There is literally no case you can make right now other than he'll be cheap to make that happen. It just seems crazy. I'm always curious how few college coaches come up. I guess it's because they haven't had a huge amount of success in recent years. But it seems that it just seems in terms of numbers, there's so much more of them. There's a lot of guys that haven't proven to suck so far. Why not give one or two of these guys more of a shot?
No, I do agree. I'm trying to think how many just end up making that leap that we've seen. I'm trying to think of just names outside of guys like Chip Kelly. I know Nick Saban, obviously the failed experiment, but yeah, I mean,
and that's probably the thing.
I don't see the huge difference in terms of knowledge and that sort of stuff. I feel like it takes just as much, acumen to be a successful college head coach as it does a pro. And also it takes being a little more it takes a little more ingenuity at the college level. You have to be doing stuff a little different than everyone else. It doesn't, recruiting and all that stuff matters. You also have to have some schematic advantage to win on a consistent basis. So I would, if I were an NFL GM looking for a head coach, I would look to college before I'd look to retread NFL coaches, guys who are just, been in the biz forever.
I think that's the problem, though, is that the last few that have actually made the leap have all bombed. Whether it's Chip Kelly, whether it's Nick Saban's failed Miami experiment, whether it's Bobby Petrino bailing on the Falcons. It's not a good recent history in terms of guys making that step up. And I think there's a general perception in the NFL that the way you treat your players is different. You're dealing now with professional men that are here doing a job. You're not dealing with kids that need to be, disciplined essentially by a scolding teacher. This is a completely different way of behaving. And I think there's just a skepticism league-wide as to how many guys inherently, intuitively understand that difference. And, even Chip Kelly has had that. That's one of the things that's come out about him in the NFL is that, you're dealing with men now. It's not just kids that you can, dismiss or treat like children.
No, I definitely agree. And yeah, that's what I touched on earlier with Chip Kelly, just like the disconnect there as a leader. He just didn't seem to be a good one in terms of leading, grown men who are paid to do their job. He just seemed to have this disconnect between him and his players. And that's what you need as a head coach. And that personality matters a lot at the position.
I guess one of the other problems is that it's probably not the financial windfall it was before. It used to be the NFL.
College coaches would want to, yeah.
Yeah, it had all the money and college didn't. Now those college coaches are getting paid a fortune. Unless you're going for the young up-and-coming guy, you're not winning them away with money. You're not saying you're going to earn 4 times more what you were getting paid. Those guys are getting paid the same. So the really marquee hirings are the guys that are already sitting pretty and have no reason to leave. Guys like David Shaw at Stanford, that is one that comes up every now and again. I mean, why would he leave?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's usually even so like Harbaugh, probably the most successful example of in recent years of college going to pros, but Harbaugh played in the NFL. That was his ultimate goal as a coach. If you didn't play in the NFL, you have the only reason you'd make the jump is because you kind of reached the top and had to stop, and you want the next big thing. And so not a lot of college guys are going to care about, I think leading a program for 20 years that's successful is more important to them than, maybe being the successful Super Bowl winning coach.
Yeah, I mean, you have to see it as the next level, which I think a lot of college guys, if they've only ever been in the college scene, aren't going to. But that brings us to, what would you say is the dream coaching ticket? If you're one of these franchises, you're one of the ownership groups or the GMs, you're looking for a new coach, you're looking for a new coaching setup, a new ticket, who do you want? What's your dream?
Of anyone available at any level, you're talking about college or, any assistant in the NFL?
I mean, you're out there hiring. What do you want to put together? Head coach and, an offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator?
I think the number one coach on the market right now is easily Kyle Shanahan. I just from what he's done, he's leading one of the best offenses of all time with a quarterback who I don't think anyone would call the top 5 quarterback before this season. And he did it with the Browns. He did it with the Redskins. They had a lot of quarterbacks that have had career years under Kyle Shanahan. After one, it might be a coincidence. After as many as he's done, I don't think it's a coincidence anymore. I think he knows what the heck he's doing and can scheme an NFL level offense against NFL level defenses. I think he is probably my number one, hands down. I also thought that Greg Roman got a bad rap as an offensive coordinator. I don't think that he's, a head coaching guy I'd want, but I think as a retread offensive coordinator, if I'm someone looking for one, that would be someone I would target as well. Defensive coordinator, top of my head, I can't really think of any. I do think Rex Ryan gets a bad rap. I wouldn't want him right away, but after a couple of years, I think if he gets some time off, catches that back up with the game, I think he'd be a good defensive coordinator still. he schemed one of the best defenses of all time there with the Jets back in 2009. I still think there's something there.
The Marcel Darius came out and criticized that Ryan defense in Buffalo after they left as being too complicated. And, they were just there was so much stuff there. They were asking them to read this and react to this and adjust this. And there was no just letting them play, going out there and attacking. That's definitely always been a hallmark of Ryan defenses. I mean, Rob's have always been on the bit of the deep end in terms of that's just never going to work. That's insane. And Rex's have been, back when the Jets the first time round, or back with the Jets way back, it was, there was some really clever stuff in there, but they seemed to be able to deal with it. Whereas this in Buffalo, it never really seemed like they were able to grasp that. Is it a personnel thing? Do you need to have guys smart enough to deal with that system, or is it just too much now?
No, I think he definitely, along the defensive line, he does way too much. They got burned so much by stunts and, slants and that sort of stuff when they were talented enough that they didn't need to be doing all that. Like they had some formations and stuff where it just, when you have the talent that they had along the defensive line and the front seven, you can line up and, beat guys one-on-one. You don't have to rely on the scheme beating guys, which all too often he went to, I'm going to out-scheme them, I'm going to outsmart them by myself, when, at some point you have to let the talent, be the talent and do the work itself. So I think that was a big issue. And the place where he needed the talent to be the talent was the secondary, is what he had with the Jets with Darrelle Revis. And that just wasn't the case with Buffalo. It just didn't play up to par this year.
One coaching ticket that seems just too ridiculously good a fit to go wrong is if you get Kyle Shanahan and drop him into that Denver team, replacing Gary Kubiak. I don't even know that you want to change defensive coordinator. You keep Wade Phillips, who is for a couple of years now.
Oh, yeah. You're not going to change. You're not going to go away from Wade Phillips at this point. I don't care who comes in there.
Well, the problem is,
Elway.
It's not necessarily, I guess it is, but you need the head coach to be on board with that. And a lot of times they're not. Any head coach that comes in is going to want his own guys there. It's going to be, I think, a tougher sell to say, you're coming in and we already have your defensive coordinator sitting here. You work with this guy.
I think if you're getting the Denver job, if you're getting that sort of talent, you're going to be okay with making a few successions.
I guess it's an interesting negotiation between what's probably the best job out there and the best coaching candidate out there. Which guy has the leverage? Assuming he wants to. Maybe he's entirely happy with the idea of walking into a team with a defensive coordinator like Wade Phillips and the defense like that. But if he wants to bring his own guys, that becomes a pretty interesting negotiation. One saying, look, I'm the guy you want running this team, and them saying, look, we're the best job out there. We want this guy to stay. Because I know...
Yeah, I think that would be, though, very interesting to see Shanahan in Denver. I'm not sure he'd even want to, considering, that his dad was the coach there, had all the success. You just would always be kind of in his shadow, I feel like. Not necessarily in his shadow, but like it would just get brought up so much that it would get kind of annoying. Obviously you have a great roster and that sort of stuff and a lot of talent to work with, but I can see not wanting to go there if I were him.
Yeah, I wonder if enough time has passed now where it's not really an issue. And plus, it's, I guess, especially because they've won a Super Bowl in between, it would probably be a different thing where if he was coming back.
If they had sucked just forever.
Last time they had success was under Mike Shanahan with the 2 Super Bowls, and they've had this drought ever since, never been back to the promised land. But, they won a Super Bowl since then. This isn't a guy coming in to completely reinvent the team. It's a guy almost kind of continuing some fairly recent success, and if he does do well, then he's pretty close in terms of kind of replicating what his dad did, as opposed to trying to live up to it constantly. I don't know. Maybe it's a thing, but maybe it seems to me like it's probably not too big an issue for him. But now we've had the whole season done, 17 weeks in the books. What's the biggest surprise to you this season, Mike?
I think there's basically one answer to this question. It's Dak Prescott, how he played this year.
Yeah.
I don't think I mean, even after the preseason he had, where he was lights out, as good as you could possibly expect from a rookie, I still was very unconvinced that he was going to be not even a starting quarterback in the NFL. I didn't think he still had that. I mean, I think the rest of the NFL didn't either, considering where he ended up getting drafted. So that has to be the biggest surprise. The fact that he came in at a passer rating of 104, led an efficient offense, only had a few bad games all season long. It was just, that to me was probably far and away the biggest story.
Yeah, I mean, the league is stacked full of guys who are dominant in preseason that have done nothing in the regular season, or have even been bad in the regular season. So, it was impressive to see him look really good in the preseason, but it's anything but a determining factor. Just because a guy is good in preseason doesn't mean he's going to dominate the regular season. How about how shockingly unready Jared Goff is?
That's not as crazy to me, because it happens. That just happens. It's a big transition. That's why I think the Prescott thing's more, is because it's just this huge transition where everything's a lot faster. Everything is more complex. Pressure gets home a lot quicker. Offensive lines are far worse in the NFL just on average than they are in college. It's just, a huge jump. And at 21 years old or whatever Jared Goff is, you just don't expect him to, pick it up immediately. There's going to be a learning curve. So that's not huge to me, but it was a surprise that he was utterly unable to play the quarterback position, even after 10 weeks.
This is where I'm going. Bench. I'm with you. I think the Dak Prescott thing is the biggest surprise. I don't think there's any alternative answer to that, because anytime a guy comes from basically nowhere as a fourth-round quarterback pick to not only play as well as he's played, but then play well enough over an extended period of time to keep Romo on the bench. I mean,
his stats were legitimately better this year than they were last year in college, which doesn't make any sense to, that just doesn't happen to anyone ever.
I mean, we were talking at the start that this is all fun and games, but there's no way he actually keeps Romo on the bench. Romo comes back, it's his job. And for most of the season, Jerry Jones was saying, when Romo is healthy, he's our quarterback. And at some point, it just became, okay, we actually can't sit this guy down. He's playing too well. It doesn't make any sense anymore. So the whole thing is ridiculous. From coming in, playing as good as he's been, and looking like the best franchise quarterback in this draft class, that in itself was insane. But then to play well enough over the entire season that a Super Bowl favorite, I guess, one of the couple of favorite teams, goes, we can't sit this guy down in favor of a Pro Bowl veteran quarterback who we love. That is the answer. But Jared Goff looking as completely hopeless as he has been kind of crazy, because all the way through the draft process, it was how unready Carson Wentz would be, and how much development he needed, and how much he needed to improve on this and that from his college tape. Jared Goff was seen as relatively polished. I mean, there was still flaws, and there was still, a change in scheme and all this kind of stuff, and the regular kind of stuff. But, this was kind of Marcus Mariota style transition, as opposed to this guy can't play for a year. I mean, he shouldn't be anywhere near a field.
Yeah. But on top of that, you have to add in the fact that he went to the Rams, and it's been, it's been 6 to 8 years now of that sort of quarterback play for the Rams. So some of it's him, some of it's them. But yeah, he looked awful. Hopefully they get one of those offensive minds in as well, because he desperately needs it at this point.
It's also kind of curious that Todd Gurley forgot how to run the football. He was injured last year, came in, looked fantastic when he was in. And then this season you're seeing him run up the back of his lineman, just run down dark alleys with no space. It just looks like a guy that's never carried the ball before. I'd be very scared if I was a Rams fan, because it was Trent Richardson-esque, just lost all vision whatsoever, lost all ability to, read blocks, just going the wrong way on, he's not setting up any blocks. He's running, like you said, right into the back of linemen. There's 4 to 5 times a game where he just plows right into his own lineman with, space on one side of him, but he decides that he's going to duck his head and go.
legitimately a lot to be concerned about. Didn't look like the same guy, and
I think that's
and no one saw it coming.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting thing now. Like we, for a while, basically since David Carr, we've all
The first.
Yeah, the first Carr, the original
Carr 1.
Ever since Carr Mark 1, we've all been completely convinced that offensive lines can break quarterbacks. Just the sheer weight of pressure coming on them. You can break a guy and he'll never be the same again. It's not that this guy just couldn't do it. It's that he had a chance and it was just done. There was no way you could come back from that amount of pressure. And it's happened to Carr. A lot of people blame Tim Couch or the Browns for what happened to Tim Couch with that. Mark Bulger at the Rams, that happened to him. He was great, and suddenly he just started seeing shadows. Done. So I think we've all accepted that it happens to quarterbacks, but I think there's a very real chance that it happens to running backs as well, and it just doesn't. It manifests itself in a different way, and it's more difficult to see because you're not necessarily flinching from obvious pressure trying to kill you. It's just that you're doing what Todd Gurley and Trent Richardson were doing, which is running down blind alleys and looking like your vision has gone to hell, and you're not comfortable with what you're reading anymore. It's not, it's no longer instinct. You're not reading where the space is opening up because you're used to no space being there, so you're just panicking, really.
No, I've said that before. I like running backs coming out of college that ran behind awful offensive lines. I would rather have a guy who ran behind an awful offensive line in college than a good one, maybe put up great stats, because it teaches you where to read blocks, how to read blocks, more than, running through a wide open hole might, or, bouncing out on stuff might. So I 100% agree. Gurley looks like he's just, shell shocked every play. He had so many linemen in his lap in the backfield, the first year and a half of his career, that he just forgot, where he should be running, what his read should be, and it looked like a completely different guy. Like I said,
I mean, there was a play I tweeted a while ago that I had to gif up because it was just so ridiculous. And he was running a perfectly normal play and running down the line, trying to find the open gap. And then it was like, right, now's the time. And he just launched himself basically into a double team block of his own lineman, like almost tackled himself. It was ridiculous. But the interesting thing is, I don't know that there's a way. It tends to be irreparable for quarterbacks. You break the guy with pressure. I don't think there's any way back. I don't know if there is for running backs because I can't think of enough people that it's happened to where you can chart the course. Is there a way back from the wilderness, or are guys done? I mean, Trent Richardson never came back from it. Is Gurley already screwed?
Yeah, I mean, 3.2 yards per carry is abysmal. Like on 278 attempts is that's almost unheard of. I don't think Richardson, I'm not sure he ever got to 278. That was the fifth most attempts in the NFL. And he only averaged 3.2 yards per carry. So basically every touch was just going nowhere. And yeah, I mean, I would seriously, they seriously have to upgrade their offensive line in Los Angeles, but I would consider running back as well, because it's just someone to spell him and not force him into, 20 carries a game at this point doing what he's doing.
I mean, there are 4 guys that either tied or exceeded his average yards per carry in terms of yards after contact. So the 4 guys that gained a greater average yards after contact than Todd Gurley. Jeez, I'm even calling him Trent Richardson. The guy's dead. Then Todd Gurley managed total this season. So yeah, I mean, I hadn't really considered this too much before now, but the Rams should be terrified. They may well have broken their best player in the space of a year, and their current face of the franchise looks terrible. So what was supposed to be this perfect combination of Goff and Gurley suddenly looks like an absolute disaster.
Yeah, that was about as bad as it can start a franchise in LA. The fans there.
Well, yeah, especially since the Jeff Fisher kind of transition mastermind has been kicked to the curb.
Yeah, we give him an extension, then we fire him, then we break our running back and quarterback, and we really don't have anyone that's good offensively.
And part of the big reason about Jeff Fisher being in the building and being the guy to like steer this ship was because he had experience of franchise moving. This was a guy that knew the pitfalls and knew how to deal with all this, and he was the first guy out the door.
What a good reason. That's what I think about when I draw up my coaching checklist.
Oh, we have just ruined the new year of every Rams fan that listens to this podcast already. That hasn't gone well, and that was entirely off the cuff and unintended as well. So there's a bonus for you.
I still think Goff's good. I'll caveat. You guys are still. I think he's still going to be good. So
yeah, there you
have
go.
faith.
There's a little bright spot for you. Mike still has faith in Jared Goff.
Just row the boat. Keep rowing the boat.
I want to get to quarterbacks because I wrote a piece today about Tyrod Taylor, and it's not just about Tyrod Taylor. There's a whole sequence of quarterbacks where this is becoming an issue, that quarterback has become this almost binary state in the NFL where you either have a legit one or you don't, and anyone that even threatens to the legit play is going to get $20 million a season because that's just the going rate. That's how it works. And so you're left in this situation where everybody is looking for the next Aaron Rodgers, but you're not going to find one. So at some point, you have to figure out where to draw the line at what's acceptable to settle for. You know, how good is a guy before you say, okay, we're done trying to find a new Aaron Rodgers. We'll just roll with this guy and try and make everything else around him as good as humanly possible and win that way. And in my opinion, Tyrod Taylor is past any threshold you want to set. He should exceed any line you want to draw in the sand in terms of being good enough to win, that you should stop looking seriously. You know, I would still draft a quarterback every single season, but that's me. But you stop looking seriously for his replacement, you pony up whatever cash it's going to take to keep him around, and you try and build a contender around Tyrod Taylor. And I think Kirk Cousins is probably in that same boat. I think Alex Smith was in that same boat, and the Chiefs had to stump up cash to keep him, and they're now the number 2 seed in the AFC, so it's kind of working out all right. What's your take on all this quarterback madness?
I think the biggest thing here that kind of that no one really has talked about is the fact that 20 million, which is, you know, everyone seems to get around 20 million, really isn't that much anymore. When Joe Flacco signed for 20 million a year, I think the cap was around like 125 million, and now it's projected to be next year like 168. So the cap is has gone up almost a third of what it was then. Like the cap has absolutely jumped up from when all those contracts started to blow up. And so now 20 million, you can still build around, that's what, an eighth of your salary cap. You can still build a very competent franchise around 20 million. It's not prohibitive in that it's limiting you from signing free agents and, retaining talent at this point. And I think that's the biggest thing to me. You still can, field, those guys are definitely good enough to win playoff games, to win, Super Bowls with, enough talent on each side of the ball that if, you think you're close, you think you can acquire that talent, go ahead and sign these guys $20 million because it's not going to prohibit you from building that roster.
By the way, as an aside, and
the cap's only going to go up more is the other thing. It's only going to keep growing.
A fun little nugget that on your 168 million cap, if the Browns cut RG3 and maybe one other player, they could have $115 million of cap space on a $168 million cap. That's
nice.
That's insane. And if the Bills do decide to cut Tyrod loose, that would be a kind of interesting landing spot for him. But I guess part of the issue is that I think people get obsessed with this chasing the great quarterback thing, and it's almost like what we've used as a kind of as a buzz term in describing PFF, that greatness is not the enemy of good or whatever, in that just because a guy is
cheesy.
Yeah, it is. I know. Yeah. But, just because a guy is never going to be Aaron Rodgers doesn't mean that the guy has no worth. And, people keep throwing the word mediocre around with guys like Taylor and Cousins. And I think that's doing them a distinct disservice. I think those guys are dramatically better than mediocre. Tyrod Taylor, I think, has been a top 10 graded quarterback for us the last 2 seasons in a row. He has a lot of traits that are objectively better than mediocre. This is a good quarterback. He's just a good quarterback that's flawed enough that he's probably never going to be a great quarterback. But not everyone is going to get a great quarterback. There just aren't that many of them around. So it seems crazy that you go, well, he's never going to be that guy, so let's get rid of him because those guys aren't around anymore.
I will say this, though, purely from a team building standpoint, you want to do what the Raiders did, you want what the Raiders had, which is to suck for, a good amount of time where you're drafting in the top 5 or top 10. You're getting quality picks. You're getting Amari Cooper. You're getting Khalil Mack. And then you find the quarterback just as it's kind of, those guys are taken off into superstars. And all of a sudden, you find a guy like Tyrod Rice is starting to peak. You find a guy like Derek Carr, they're starting to peak, and all of a sudden you're a contender, and they should be a contender now for the foreseeable future. You don't want to be drafting 18th, 22nd for 4 years in a row because it's just harder to acquire talent at that point. You're in the quarterback purgatory, as people say. It does make it harder to find that talent. But I think if you're a good GM, you can overcome that. And especially, like I said, the fact that the cap just keeps growing is only making $20 million for quarterback not crazy and not like a bad thing to do.
Nobody has that kind of time, though. I mean, even Reggie McKenzie was starting to come under ridiculous pressure.
I feel like GMs get a lot of time, though.
Oh, they
get a lot more than head coaches.
I mean,
a lot more undeserved time, too.
Even he was coming under a ridiculous amount of pressure, and that franchise seemed to be consistently moving in the right direction, albeit slowly. And people were going, look, at some point this has got to actually start accelerating, otherwise it'll be like 2020 before anything happens. But I don't know how many GMs are going to get the kind of time that McKenzie did to orchestrate that giant turnaround that necessitates sucking for an extended period of time to generate those draft picks and stuff. The other point with Tyrod Taylor specifically is, so they benched him in week 17, which actually makes a certain degree of sense because you fire the coaches, you're now completely rudderless essentially as an organization, and you don't actually know if you want to pick up this guy's contract, at which point you don't want to risk being on the hook for 2 years worth of guaranteed dollars in case he does get injured badly. So I'm kind of fine with that. It was a bit of a sort of asshole way of going about it, but it makes sense.
But when they agreed to that deal, though, Tyrod, saw the writing on the wall that was a very legitimate possibility just because of how crazily the whole contract was set up.
Well, this is the thing, is that, so when you look at it, if they pick up the next 2 years of his contract, he would, if he plays through those 3 years, he would get $50 million in cash, right? Which is like $16.67 million a season, which is cheap for a half-decent quarterback. I mean, it's not even, you're saying $20 million is becoming reasonable. If you get him for under 17 a season, that's a bargain. But next season, 2017, they're on the hook for $27.5 million. What? I just don't understand the way they've structured that contract. It's like, in a 3-year sequence, it's a perfectly reasonable sum of money, but $27.5 million worth of cash is making everybody go, oh, Jesus, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, I have no clue how that contract got signed. It was one of the craziest things, and that's why it's almost like they had this backdoor to where, hey, we have no clue if you're going to be the starter. You might definitely easily be cut next year, is basically what the contract said, and we don't want to, we really aren't sure that you're a starter, which was, it looked like a great vote of confidence when they signed it because, 6 years, whatever, but it wasn't at all. It was more of, we have no clue if you're still good or not. And it seems like they still don't know if he's good.
That's the thing, is that it weirdly sets them up into a situation where the only way that makes sense is if we are 100% sure that you are the next Aaron Rodgers or you're not. So like it's like you're either a superstar or you suck and we're getting rid of you because we're not paying you $27 million unless you're amazing. But the other thing is the actual cap hit isn't that bad. The cap hit, I don't know what it was, but it's under 20 in 2017. He would be the number one highest paid quarterback in the league for that $27.5 million, but he's like 17th in terms of cap hit. So it's literally only the sheer volume of Benjamins you're handing over to the guy that is the problem. It's just that you have to hand him an absolute suitcase full of money. But in terms of salary cap, it's actually not hurting you at all. It's just that some guy has to hand over a giant wad of cash.
Yeah, if the Bills move on from him, I don't know what they would have to be in the middle of a complete rebuild because, I mean, you're just not going to find the chances of finding a guy as good as him just are slim in the NFL. It's just hard to find a good quarterback. And I mean, look at what EJ Manuel did the other day. That was not above average. That was not NFL level quarterback play, and it wasn't even close to what we've seen from Tyrod this year. So
he should just walk into the meeting with the tape of Cardale and EJ Manuel in that final game and just say,
exactly,
this is what happens when I'm not here. Make your decision.
Yeah, on one level, I want him to leave because, you know, they don't seem to appreciate him in Buffalo. Yeah. And he could go to a spot with, you know, that it could, like you said, the Browns would be fun to watch him play there with, you know, $120 million in cap space. That'd be fun.
I don't think he's alone, though, and I don't think it's a Buffalo specific thing, though. I think people just object to these quarterbacks that are good but not great. It's this.
Well, it's the guys that, you know, that hold on to the ball, don't run the offense, drop back passing offense to a T, and guys who are going to, you know, not be like the traditional, more of the Russell Wilson type, so to speak, who have the running. Like, I think the running threat gets, you know, undersold in the national conversation about quarterbacks. Just what that does to opposing defenses. It seems like, you know, head coaches and GMs don't seem to appreciate that when it's a huge deal.
Yeah, and especially for Taylor. I mean, people use the Bills' running game as an excuse to kind of knock him down. It's like he's got the number one rushing attack in the league. It's like, yeah, but he's responsible for more than 20% of their rushing yards every season.
Yeah.
So
and the option looks give them, you know, just more favorable run blocking. Like, he's responsible for a lot of their success. So yeah.
Are you in the same situation with Kirk Cousins? Have Washington got to pay him and keep him around?
I think they do. I think I would, if I were them, also draft a quarterback. You know, I would start that process again just to see. But if they moved on from him, what are you gonna? You're wasting a pretty good roster there. When, you know, I realize they didn't make the playoffs this year, but having successful seasons still, you know, it still matters to some degree, even if you're not necessarily a Super Bowl contender. I think they should just focus on adding defensive talent at this point.
Yeah, there's two aspects to this. There's one, can you win games with this guy? And we've seen that both teams can win games with that guy. And the second part is, what are the chances that you will upgrade on him in even a medium-term deal? Even if it's not going to be this offseason, what are the chances that you'll find a guy better than him in the next 2-3 off seasons? And I think for both guys, the answer is pretty minimal. I mean, those are flawed quarterbacks, but you're not going to find a better one, or it's very unlikely that you'll find a better one because there just aren't that many. You know, we're talking about guys that are in the top 10, top 15 quarterbacks in the league, and every year you're going to get a few guys come into the league, and most of them aren't going to be better. You know, you may find one that is, and you have to have that guy, otherwise it doesn't work. Even if you just limit yourself to the past few number one overall picks, there aren't that many. I mean, I would say that Tyrod Taylor is on a par, if not better, than most of those guys. So you're talking about needing the number one overall pick to even be in the same conversation as a guy like Tyrod Taylor, and you're questioning whether you want to pay the guy $16 million a year. Just seems nuts to me. Let's end this. Actually, no, we've got two things to go. Let's go with the Renner's hot take and get that out of the way. You got a hot take this week, Michael?
I do, and it has to do with kind of all the rash of injuries to the quarterbacks in the AFC. Just people going into playoffs with, and just all throughout the NFL, actually, teams, you know, injuries affecting them. I think that the NFL trade deadline should be abolished until it should end when Week 17, when the regular season ends. I want to see, you know, guys mortgaging I want to see the Raiders mortgaging their whole future to get Drew Brees to have a shot at winning the Super Bowl this year. And I think the salary cap implications should also be somewhat laxed for trades, or should be able to be finagled somehow, because that's also a huge, you know, reason why a lot of trades don't happen in the NFL. I just think it would be more fun when teams, you know, do lose key pieces to be able to replace, you know, have a chance of replacing them, because it screws a lot of teams. I know Raiders are the most obvious example. The Packers secondary is completely decimated. You don't think they would want a corner at this point? I would love to see more trades in the NFL, and I'm not sure they would be huge impact, trying to get a guy updated into your scheme, with only a handful of weeks left in the season. But I know the NFL wants to be in the forefront and wants to be, the biggest thing. I think this would also help them. They would be the more topic of conversation all throughout the season, what trades are going to happen, that sort of thing. So I think the NFL deadline should be abolished.
I like that. I mean, look what the Vikings did when their quarterback went down before the season. Can you imagine what would happen if they were heading into the playoffs and he goes down? They would send everything. They would do a Herschel Walker trade.
And that made the NFL this year more exciting. The fact that Sam Bradford, came to this team, it didn't help them at all, but, it just was more... it was just a better talking point throughout the year.
I actually don't know why the NFL trade deadline is so early in the season. It doesn't seem to make a huge amount of sense to me. I mean, it's basically ensuring that you don't have that much happen.
Trades.
Because why would you risk massive things there? Like, nobody's going to go mortgage the future when it can turn around so severely. The Vikings 5-0. Dismal the second half of the season, don't make the playoffs, aren't even really that close to it by the end. So people aren't throwing everything at trades because stuff can completely turn around over the course of the season. If you extend it to the end of the regular season, say, exactly where the hell you are, and if you're going to head into a postseason or not. You could even potentially, create like a bye-week gap for teams heading into the playoffs. Now we have a week's break. Everyone can go trade crazy. Get 2 weeks, integrate guys into your system. Yeah, trade week. Get everyone into your system and hit the playoffs with a few new guys to bolster everybody's team.
And it would help the NFL. I see no reason. I think everyone's on board with this.
I think they are. I think we've already passed this one. This is move number 2 when we take over Rodgers' job. For what was it? $15 million each we're going to take. I think we can probably get a bonus out of this just from this deal. It brings us nicely though to we've got our playoff teams. The playoffs are set. We'll get to those later in the week with Tuckman. But that leaves a bunch of teams now, 20 in fact, looking for 2017, the next year. They're looking at the draft. They're looking beyond. Which team that didn't make the playoffs is in the best situation to contend for a Super Bowl next year?
For a Super Bowl, man.
Super Bowl.
I have three teams that I think will make the playoffs next year after not making this year.
Okay.
Or be right there. One is the Tennessee Titans. I think. One, they're playing in the AFC South. 2, they have a lot of cap space heading into this offseason. They could make a lot of additions to the defensive side of the ball. And 3, I think Marcus Mariota is only going to get better as he continues throughout his career. So I think a lot of things going right there for them. I think they end up winning the South next year. Other team in the AFC, I think, is the Chargers. They just lost so many impact players on that team. Losing Keenan Allen, losing Jason Barrett. Their best offensive and defensive weapon. I just think if they can figure out what's going on in that offensive line, just to get something going right there on that offensive line, that they will be right in the hunt there in the AFC West. And then the last team, I think the Carolina Panthers imploded this year. I think they are probably the team that was the most, different from the record in terms of talent level and where they ended up. I think they could have been a team that went 10-6 this year, and they did not. They ended up way down at 6-10. They ended up complete opposite. So I think just another year, if Kuechly doesn't, if he gets back and is healthy the whole year, I think that Panthers team will be right back in the hunt in the NFC South.
Wow. San Diego has just got such a brutal division to deal with, though. I mean,
that is the thing.
This is actually, I didn't actually realize until looking at the records, but this is panned out pretty much exactly as I said it would preseason, which is there was the 3 good teams and San Diego. Though admittedly that took a lot to derail for San Diego to actually end up that bad. But even if it just seems that's a big mountain to climb just in terms of coming out of that division. I think for all those teams that's tough to do. I'm with you on Tennessee. I think that makes sense, and especially just because it's that division. That makes a lot of sense. I think Washington, if they do keep Kirk Cousins, that is a team heading in the right direction. As you keep saying, it's the best offense in football if you ignore the quarterback and the running back. I think there's a lot of pieces there. That's a team I think that could succeed, especially in that I don't know that we'll see the same success from either Dallas or New York next season for entirely different reasons, but they feel like two teams that could regress a little bit, and I think Washington's only heading in the other direction.
They got some free agents, though, don't they? I think Deshaun is a free agent for them, which is big.
But they get Doxson back, and then basically didn't play this year. So
yeah, Deshaun, Garcon, we'll see. I still don't love their defense, but yeah.
No, I mean, their defense is not amazing. It can definitely. But again, you've got some young players that showed flashes. You've got, a whole new offseason to build from. I think they've got a chance. But that's going to do it for our end of season wrap-up podcast. We'll be back later in the week, as we said, to preview the playoff games, the wildcard matches. And we're going to continue this podcast for who knows how long, but there's going to be no changes immediately. We'll figure out what our off-season plan is somewhere down the line. Hope you've enjoyed listening to us all season, and for this rambly podcast, from me and Mike, take it easy.